On the day of the awards ceremony at City Hall in Springfield, I stood at the entrance in full dress uniform. The brass on my jacket caught the afternoon light. My boots were polished to a dark, deliberate shine. My name, Emily Harper, was not on the guest list. "She's not on the roster," the officer at the door said, running his finger down the printed sheet clipped to a board. He did not look at my face. He looked at the page as if it were law. Inside, applause rolled across the hall in measured waves. The sound echoed against high ceilings and marble columns. I could see the stage from where I stood, just enough to recognize the department crest projected behind the podium. Kyle Harper, my brother. Courage of the Year. His photograph was printed on the program someone had left on the registration table. He stood there in his uniform, chin lifted slightly, expression fixed in the controlled seriousness that photographs prefer. I stood 2 feet from the open doorway and remained outside. "You can congratulate him later," my mother whispered beside me. Her hand rested briefly on my arm, not in comfort but in caution. "Don't make this awkward." I did not answer. People passed us in tailored suits and pressed dresses. They smiled at the officer, offered their names, stepped inside without pause. Some of them glanced at me, then at my uniform, then back at the officer. No one asked a question. The doors swung closed again, muting the applause into a distant vibration. I watched my reflection in the polished brass handle. My posture was straight, my face neutral. No one would have guessed I had responded to the same call that made my brother a headline. 40 minutes passed. The ceremony inside moved through speeches and citations. I recognized certain phrases through the door when it opened briefly to admit late arrivals. Exceptional leadership. Commitment to the department. Unwavering loyalty. Unwavering loyalty. The words settled heavily. At one point, the doors opened wide enough for me to see him clearly. Kyle stood at the podium, hands resting easily on either side. He thanked the city. He thanked the department. He thanked our parents, seated in the front row. He did not look toward the entrance. My father sat with his shoulders squared and proud. My mother's eyes were bright. I recognized the expression on her face. It was the same one she wore at graduation ceremonies and church services when someone mentioned our family name. "She's not on the roster," the officer repeated after checking the sheet a second time, as if repetition made it final. I nodded once. I did not step back. The department chief entered from the side corridor just as another wave of applause rose from the hall. Conversations near the entrance fell quiet. She moved with the kind of controlled purpose that shifts a room without effort. Everyone inside stood when she appeared. She did not look at them. She looked at me. Her gaze moved from my boots to the badge on my chest. Recognition flickered, not surprise. "Who decided a firefighter doesn't belong here?" she asked. The question was not loud. It did not need to be. The officer stiffened immediately. "There must be a mistake, Chief," he said. "Yes," she replied. "There must be." My mother inhaled sharply beside me. I felt her body go rigid. The chief extended her hand toward the door. "Open it." The officer obeyed. The hall fell silent when we stepped inside. Kyle was still on the stage, award in hand. He paused mid-sentence when he saw the movement near the entrance. His eyes flicked toward me briefly, then away. The chief did not address the audience. She addressed the stage. "Recognition," she said evenly, "belongs to everyone who earned it." There was no confrontation, no raised voices, just a sentence that rearranged the room. I remained near the back wall. I did not need to stand beside my brother to know what had happened. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a decision, and decisions have reasons. I knew the reason. A year earlier, just before dawn, the highway outside Riverbend had turned to glass. Ice had formed in thin, invisible layers that made the asphalt look harmless until tires touched it. The call came in at 5:12 a.m., multi-vehicle collision, possible entrapment. We arrived to find an overturned pickup straddling 2 lanes. Steam rose from the engine. A woman was trapped inside, suspended by her seatbelt, the roof crushed inward. The department SUV had been clipped during the response. Its front axle was twisted. Fluid pooled beneath it, dark against the ice. Kyle stepped out first, scanning the vehicles. "Secure the unit," he shouted. "We can't lose it." I moved toward the pickup. The passenger window was fractured but intact. I struck it once with the tool at my belt. The glass collapsed inward in a clean break. Cold air flooded the cab. The woman's eyes were open, disoriented. Her lips were turning blue. "Stay with me," I said. My voice sounded distant in my own ears. Metal had folded around her legs. I cut the seatbelt and braced my shoulder against the door frame. The ice beneath my boots shifted slightly. Behind me, Kyle's voice carried across the highway. "The SUV is department property. We need to stabilize it now." I did not look back. The woman's pulse was faint. I slid one arm under her shoulders and pulled as another firefighter worked to pry the frame away from her legs. The metal resisted, then gave. We dragged her clear just as the paramedics arrived. She survived. The SUV did not. It was declared a total loss 2 days later. At home that night, the kitchen felt narrow and sharp. My father stood at the counter, hands planted flat against the wood. "You shamed the family," he said quietly. Not angry, not loud, just certain. "You chose a stranger over your own unit." Kyle sat at the table, silent. "The vehicle was collateral," my father continued. "Do you understand what you cost us?" I folded the dish towel carefully before setting it down. "The woman lived," I said. "That's not the point," he replied. "It was always the point to me, but not in that house." Weeks later, our neighbor, Mrs. Carter, mentioned something in passing while collecting her mail. "Such a shame about the SUV," she said. "Your father was counting on that deal going through." "What deal?" I asked. She hesitated. "Oh, I thought you knew. He'd put it up as collateral to help Kyle." Kyle's debts had grown quietly. Business loans, equipment leases, investments that never settled. Losing the vehicle meant the refinancing fell apart. I had not cost them pride. I had cost them leverage. At City Hall, as applause resumed, I stood near the back wall and watched my brother hold the plaque steady for photographs. He looked composed. My father looked satisfied. I understood then that being left off the list had not been accidental. It was easier to celebrate one version of courage, the kind that protected assets, not the kind that saved strangers. When the ceremony ended, people surrounded Kyle in small, congratulatory clusters. My mother reached him first. I did not step forward. The chief approached me instead. "Good work at Riverbend," she said quietly. I nodded once. Across the room, my father watched us. His expression did not change. He believed doors could be closed quietly, that names could be omitted without consequence. But systems remember, records exist, and I had learned long ago that patience outlasts humiliation. That was the day I stopped waiting to be included. I began to prepare. The applause at City Hall faded quickly. By evening, the photographs were already circulating online. Kyle's name appeared beside phrases like decisive leadership and department integrity. My name did not appear at all. At home, the house was quiet in the way it becomes after an event meant to prove something. My father loosened his tie. My mother folded the program carefully and placed it on the side table, as if it were fragile. No one mentioned the door. 3 days later, Mrs. Carter knocked on my front porch just before dusk. She held a plate of something covered in foil, the kind of offering people bring when they don't know how to start a conversation. "You were brave, you know," she said, handing it to me. "On that highway." I thanked her. She hesitated. Her eyes shifted toward my father's driveway next door. "I suppose you've heard," she added. "Heard what?" She lowered her voice. "Your father had put that SUV up as collateral for Kyle's loans. When it was declared a loss, well, The foil crinkled slightly beneath my fingers. "That deal was supposed to clear everything," she continued, "at least for a while." I nodded once. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I searched public filings, business registrations, liens. The numbers were there, if you knew where to look. Kyle had been borrowing against expansion plans for nearly 2 years, equipment leases, vendor credit, a private lender I recognized by reputation alone. The SUV had not just been a vehicle, it had been leverage, and I had removed it. A week later, I mailed invitations for my 5-year service anniversary. It was a small ceremony at the station, nothing public, just the team. I addressed one envelope to my parents. It came back unopened, no explanation, no note. Instead, a message appeared on my phone that evening. "Stay out of our business." There was no greeting, no signature. I read it twice before setting the phone down. Business, that word again. 2 months passed quietly. Then I received notice of an internal investigation. The envelope was official. Department letterhead, formal language, allegation, misuse of funds from the fire department charity account. Complainant, Thomas Harper, my father. I sat at my desk and read the document in full before reacting. The accusation was specific. Funds redirected, receipts altered, unauthorized transfers during the winter quarter. The signature at the bottom of the complaint page was careful, but the handwriting on the attached statements was not. I recognized Kyle's script immediately, the way his K angled slightly left, the way he pressed too hard on the downstroke of an H. Someone had assembled a version of events in which I was reckless, disloyal, financially careless. It was thorough. Dates were listed, transaction summaries attached, screenshots printed and stapled. They had not rushed this. They had prepared it. I did not call my father. I did not call Kyle. Instead, I logged into the department archive system and began pulling records, radio logs, dispatch timestamps, access records for the charity account. The winter quarter in question had been busy, severe weather, multiple structure fires, one mutual aid call that lasted 16 hours. On 2 of the dates listed in the complaint, I had been on active response outside county lines. GPS logs confirmed it. The charity account itself required dual authorization for withdrawals over a specific amount. My access key had not been used on the transfers cited, but someone else's had. I recognized that number too. Former archive employee, terminated 8 months earlier, Kyle's friend. I saved copies of everything to an external drive. The next morning, 2 officers arrived at my door in Lakewood. They were polite, professional. My father stood with them. He did not look at me when I opened the door. "We need to ask you a few questions regarding the charity account," one of the officers said. "Of course," I replied. Inside, my living room felt smaller with 3 additional bodies in it. My father spoke first. "She's been under a lot of stress," he said evenly, "after the Riverbend incident, after the ceremony." The officer nodded. "There's also video," my father added, "from the archive room." He produced a flash drive from his pocket. I accepted it without comment and connected it to my laptop. The footage showed the interior of the station archive room, a figure entering after hours, accessing the file cabinet, removing documents. The timestamp in the corner read 2:17 a.m. The figure wore a department jacket, my jacket. The officers watched my face carefully. "That night," I said, "I was on a call in Mason County." One officer glanced at his partner. "I can provide the dispatch record," I continued, "and the GPS log from Engine 4. My father shifted slightly. The officer leaned closer to the screen. "Zoom in," he said. I did. The metadata window opened. Creation date, 3 days earlier. Edited file properties visible. The timestamp overlay did not match the original recording format used by our system. The room grew very quiet. "That's not possible," my father said too quickly. I clicked into the archive access log. Entry at 2:11 a.m. User ID, archived_tech 17, Kyle's former contact. The officers exchanged a look. Later that week, a formal hearing was scheduled. The department chief attended personally. Radio logs were submitted, GPS records printed and certified. A forensic analyst reviewed the video and confirmed it had been altered. Frame manipulation, timestamp overlay inserted manually. The shoe prints photographed outside the archive room that night matched size 11 boots. Kyle wore size 11. I wore size 8. When the analyst stated it aloud, no one spoke. My father sat in the second row. For the first time, he looked uncertain, not angry, not defensive, just hollow. The allegations were dismissed, officially cleared. The letter arrived in the mail 5 days later. I placed it in a folder with the rest of the documentation. Kyle was placed under administrative review. Debts surfaced during the inquiry, private loans, overextended credit, fear of losing his position. The narrative they had built around me collapsed under documentation. I did not confront him. I did not confront my father. There was nothing left to argue. The system had answered. That evening, I stood alone in my kitchen and poured a glass of water. The house was silent. Outside, the streetlight flickered once before settling into a steady glow. I understood then that humiliation is only useful to those who expect you to accept it quietly. Preparation is quieter, more patient, and far more permanent. The officers left my house without placing me under arrest. They left with a copy of the GPS logs. They left with the metadata report. They left with a silence that had shifted direction. My father remained on the porch a few seconds longer than necessary. "You're making this worse," he said finally, his voice low, as if neighbors might be listening. "I'm documenting it," I replied. He looked at me as though that were the same thing. When he walked to his car, he did not slam the door. He closed it carefully. Control, even then. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday at headquarters, a formal review panel, internal affairs, legal oversight, department command. I arrived 15 minutes early. I wore my uniform, not the dress version from City Hall, the standard one, clean, pressed, unremarkable. Kyle was already seated at the far end of the corridor when I entered. He looked smaller than I remembered. His jacket was unbuttoned. His foot tapped once against the tile before going still. We did not greet each other. Inside the conference room, the air smelled faintly of paper and coffee. The department chief sat at the center of the table, 2 members of internal affairs to her right, a legal advisor to her left, a forensic analyst at the end. My father took a seat behind Kyle. He avoided my eyes. The footage was shown first. The image on the screen was grainy, slightly distorted. A figure in a department jacket entering the archive room. The timestamp blinked in the corner. 2:17 a.m. The analyst stood and adjusted his glasses. "This overlay," he said, pointing with a pen, "is inconsistent with the station's native recording format." He clicked to another slide. Side-by-side comparisons appeared. Frame rate differences, pixel layering inconsistencies, metadata flags. "The file was created 3 days prior to submission," he continued. "It was not recorded on the date indicated." The room remained quiet. The analyst moved to the next image. Photographs of shoe impressions outside the archive room. "Size 11, he said. "Department-issued tread pattern." He paused. "Officer Harper wears size 8. The legal advisor made a small note on a yellow pad. Kyle shifted in his seat. "User ID archived_tech 17 accessed the system at 2:11 a.m. The chief read from the report. That account belonged to a former employee terminated 8 months ago. Kyle's hands tightened slightly on the edge of the table. "Officer Kyle Harper," the chief said evenly, "you were in contact with this individual following his termination." It was not a question. Kyle swallowed once. "He still had access to old login credentials," he said. "I didn't know he would—" "You submitted this footage," the chief interrupted. "Yes." "And the complaint?" Kyle hesitated. My father leaned forward slightly as if proximity might change the direction of the air. I believe there were irregularities, Kyle said. In the charity account? The legal advisor asked. Yes. The advisor flipped through the financial report. Dual authorization was required for the withdrawals cited, she said. Your authorization key was used. Kyle's jaw tightened. It must have been copied, he said. The chief's gaze did not waver. Your key was used in person at the terminal, she replied. The camera outside the finance office confirms your presence on both dates. The room did not move. My father's posture shifted for the first time. His shoulders lowered slightly, as if something invisible had been removed. The analyst returned to his seat. The chief folded her hands. Officer Emily Harper, she said, turning toward me. Dispatch logs confirm you were on active call in Mason County on both dates in question. Yes, Chief. GPS tracking from Engine 4 confirms your location. Yes. Do you have anything further to add? No. I did not elaborate. There was nothing left to explain. The system had done the explaining. The panel recessed briefly. When they returned, the decision was formal and concise. All allegations against Officer Emily Harper are dismissed in full. The investigation into falsified evidence will proceed under separate review. Kyle did not look at me when the words were read. My father did. His expression was not anger. It was not apology. It was something emptier, as though he had believed the structure would hold simply because he had built it. After the hearing, the corridor outside felt wider. Kyle exited first. He walked past me without speaking. My father followed. He stopped once just beyond the door. You could have handled this privately, he said quietly. I did, I replied. He searched my face for something. Regret, perhaps, or softness. He found neither. This didn't have to become public, he added. It became public when you filed it, I said. He nodded once, slow. Then he left. 3 days later, the official dismissal letter arrived. Department seal. Formal language. Permanent record. I placed it inside a folder with the rest of the documentation. I did not frame it. I did not share it. There was no need. Kyle was placed on administrative leave pending further inquiry into the falsified submission and unauthorized system access. The loans surfaced during the financial review, private lenders, equipment debt, overextended credit lines. Fear, I realized, can turn into strategy when someone believes they are running out of options. I did not attend the follow-up proceedings. I had returned to shift rotation. Fires do not pause for internal hearings. One evening in early spring, a new trainee reported to Engine 4. Her name was Sarah. She stood straighter than necessary, hands clasped tightly behind her back. Yes, ma'am, she said too quickly when I introduced myself. You can relax, I told her. She nodded, though she did not fully. 3 months later, she asked me to stand beside her at her swearing-in ceremony. I'd be honored, I said. The ceremony was small. No marble columns, no printed programs, just the station bay, polished trucks, and a handful of families seated on folding chairs. When her name was called, she stepped forward without hesitation. Afterward, she approached me quietly. Thank you for always showing up, she said. It was simple, precise. She did not know what those words restored. I cannot choose the family I was born into, but I can choose how I stand when someone tries to cross my name off a list. The station doors remained open that evening. Light spilled out onto the pavement. I stayed until the last chair was folded and stored. Then I drove home, not to celebrate, not to explain, just to continue. 3 months after the hearing, spring settled over Lakewood without asking permission. The air changed first, less weight, less ice in the mornings. Kyle's name had stopped appearing in the local paper. Administrative review moved slowly, deliberately. The department did not announce outcomes until they were complete. At the station, nothing in my routine shifted. I checked equipment at 6 o'clock. I logged reports without commentary. I answered calls. Structure has its own mercy. It does not care about family narratives. It cares about completion. One afternoon, a certified letter arrived at my house. Return address, Thomas Harper. I placed it on the kitchen counter and left it there for several hours. When I finally opened it, the paper inside was brief. Emily, there have been misunderstandings. The investigation was never meant to escalate. We were trying to protect the family from financial exposure. Kyle panicked. I reacted. We should meet. Dad. I folded the letter once and placed it back inside the envelope. I did not call him. Instead, I drove to the county records office. If there is one thing the department teaches you, it is that documentation is stronger than memory. The clerk at the counter recognized me. Small town. I need certified copies of any liens or collateral filings under Thomas Harper within the last 18 months, I said. She raised an eyebrow slightly but did not ask why. 20 minutes later, I held a folder containing exactly what I expected. The SUV had not been the only asset leveraged. My father's contracting business had been tied to 2 private notes, short-term, high interest, one nearing default. Kyle's name appeared as beneficiary on a pending transfer agreement contingent on clearing departmental standing. The narrative was simple. If Kyle lost his position, the refinancing collapsed. If I were formally charged with financial misconduct, the charity investigation would have distracted from Kyle's review. Delay can be currency. I returned home and began organizing the documents chronologically. Loan dates, collateral declarations, the date the complaint was filed against me, the day the video was created. Patterns reveal themselves when placed in order. 2 evenings later, my father arrived unannounced. He stood on my porch, hat in hand, posture carefully composed. "You got my letter?" he said. "Yes." "Can we talk?" I stepped aside and allowed him in. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had once searched public filings alone. He looked older in my house than he did in his own. "I never intended for it to go that far," he began. "You filed the complaint," I said. "I was trying to buy time," he replied. "If the department was focused on you, Kyle could stabilize things." "By accusing me of theft." His jaw tightened. "You would have been cleared," he said quickly. "You're careful." I studied him for a long moment. "So the accusation was strategic," I said. He did not answer directly. "Families make sacrifices," he said instead. I reached into the folder beside me and slid a copy of the lien agreement across the table. He looked down at it, then at the next page, then at the third. His fingers went still. "You went to the records office," he said. "Yes." Silence settled between us. "You don't understand the pressure," he added finally, "the business, the loans." "I understand documentation," I replied. He leaned back slowly. "You're going to use this against us." "No," I said. "I'm going to file it." He frowned. "With whom?" "The department's ethics board," I answered, as a statement of coercive intent tied to an internal complaint. His face drained of color. That would destroy Kyle. I held his gaze evenly. "The hearing already addressed falsified evidence," I said. "This explains motive. You'd ruin your own brother." "I didn't file the complaint." The room felt very still. He had always believed that I would absorb the damage quietly, that I would accept being the adjustment. "You'd testify?" he asked. "Yes." He stood abruptly, then stopped himself, hands gripping the back of the chair instead of slamming it aside. "You're choosing outsiders over your own blood." "I'm choosing the record," I said. He stared at me as if searching for the daughter who once folded towels and kept silent. "She's gone," I added quietly. "You made that decision." He left without another word. The next morning, I delivered a sealed envelope to the department's legal office. Inside were certified copies of the lien agreements, the transfer contingency, and my written statement outlining the sequence of events. I did not dramatize it. I did not speculate. I provided dates. The review expanded. Within 6 weeks, Kyle resigned pending formal disciplinary action. The department issued a statement regarding falsified evidence and conflict of interest. No names were published, but the implication was clear. My father's business filed for restructuring shortly afterward. There was no public scandal, just quiet corrections. In early May, Sarah approached me again. "My swearing-in ceremony is next week," she said. "Would you stand with me?" "Yes." The station bay was open that afternoon. Sunlight stretched across the concrete floor. Her parents sat in folding chairs near the engine. When she raised her right hand, her voice did not shake. Afterward, she stepped aside with me near the lockers. "I heard some things," she said carefully, "about the hearing." I waited. "I just wanted you to know," she added, "that the way you handled it matters." I nodded once. "Thank you for always showing up," she said. Those words settled differently than applause ever had. Later that evening, I drove past my parents' house. The porch light was on. The curtains were drawn. I did not stop. Distance is not revenge. It is boundary. I cannot choose the family I was born into, but I can choose the systems I serve. I can choose the lines I will not cross, and I can choose not to stand outside closed doors waiting for permission. I stepped inside my own house, locked it behind me, and set my keys on the table. The room was quiet, steady, under control. Have you ever realized that silence was never weakness, only timing? If this story resonated with you, tell me what part felt the most real. And if you'd like to continue following stories about quiet strength and deliberate choices, stay with me.